All right, final session of the day. How's everyone doing? Are you guys happy you came? We're so pumped. It's such a good day. Such a good day. I feel like it flew by. Just so much good networking, so much good opportunity. This last panel, we intentionally anchored these two speakers at the end because they've taught us so much about hormone health, nutrition. This is going to be an incredible panel. So we'll probably do like 30 to 45 minutes of just like fireside chat, and then we'll open it up to questions. I think you guys are going to have a lot of great questions. So let's welcome up Dr. Brittney and then Dr. Jacey as well. Cool.
Testing.
Test.
Check.
How you both doing? Good?
Good, yeah. This has been amazing.
Awesome.
I've learned so much today.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know this, but you both, one of the coincidences that you both have is you're both chiropractors by trade.
All right.
Nice to meet you.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, but how we both got drawn to you was your perspective on hormone health, nutrition, diet and lifestyle. We both had you on separate podcasts. We've learned so much from you. So we kind of wanted to do just like a deep dive on hormone health, and we can take the conversation wherever we want to take it. And this is probably a really stupid question, but if we're taking it down to like the most basic level, like what actually are hormones and the role that they play, and what kind of hormones should we be caring about?
Cool, thank you. So hormones are basically chemicals that are secreted by a gland in the body and goes into the bloodstream and does so many things. So hormones do pretty much make us who we are. So that's why when we make lifestyle choices that influence hormones, it therefore makes us who we are. Mm-hmm. So to give you a simple way.
Yeah, well, and really it's funny, we're both chiropractors, because other than the nervous system, your hormones are like the second system that really control everything that happens in your body.
Yeah. Is there a reason, do you think that it's a coincidence that you're both chiropractors and you got into nutrition? Like, was it your experience working with patients that made you realize, wow, like diet, lifestyle, optimizing your hormone health, like those are huge levers to be able to pull on?
Well, I would say, in our curriculum, chiropractors learn way more about nutrition. If you ask any medical doctor how much nutrition education they received, it's like a day of nutrition. So
a day?
We really, literally.
That's crazy.
If you ask Dr. Barry, it's I think he even mentions like he learned like 5 hours of nutrition. But
And that's like if they take it too, because sometimes it's an elective that they don't even have to take.
Right. Yeah. So when it comes to lifestyle, when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to all the things, sleep, that's what we learn in chiropractic school, how to address more root cause of empowering your health.
Yeah, well, and we spend more time with our patients too. My appointments, like a follow-up adjustment appointment is at least 15 minutes, which is double the time most people are spending with their MDs. And I actually got into nutrition before I became a chiropractor too. So I was a registered dietitian, realized what BS that whole world was, and decided to go back to school to be a chiropractor. So I kind of came at it from the opposite angle.
Well, you got the nutrition degree and then realized everything that you were being taught wasn't how humans should actually be eating. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was in the hospital, did my dietetic internship at UC San Diego, and was working in the hospital. It's like this prestigious internship, and I was like crying every day. I was there because it was so awful, and even the dietitians there were so mean. Yeah, it was not a good experience.
Yeah. Have either of you had your own personal experience? Because we've heard a lot about just personal health journeys and people being, we keep saying be the CEO of your own health, take your health in your own hands. Do either of you have any of your own like anecdotal stories of using diet, lifestyle, different like holistic mechanisms to be able to improve your health?
All right, I'll go first. So I had a really successful functional medicine practice for years, and I was in Nebraska, where functional medicine is not like a standard style of healthcare, so to speak. So I'm the type of guy I put 100% into this, and I was working with my I thought I tried to save everybody, every patient. I wanted to help them and heal them, and working so hard. But I also I was kind of like that mechanic that would fix your car, but then you go home and in my car's like in the driveway on Blokes, broke down, and so I was kind of burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah.
And so I actually got to a point where like Josh, our stories are very similar. Josh is my partner. He mentioned about his wife asking for a divorce. My wife didn't use the D word, but I almost wish she would have, but it was kind of like there was something dying in our marriage, you know. And so I went and got my blood levels checked, and the doctor I went to said, well, JC, your testosterone isn't low enough for us to do anything about it. So that day he prescribed antidepressants, and he also took my blood pressure and prescribed blood pressure medication. So I was like, okay, well, so I left. I threw those both in the trash on the way out.
Because you're a smart man.
You're right, thank you. And then I did start to do all the things that I learned in school to optimize my hormones. And for me, it was I needed to prioritize sleep. Cut out all the inflammatory foods. And so I made some changes, and I did feel the improvements of that. But yeah, it was really interesting. But I didn't feel 100%. There was just still something kind of like, lacking. And so fast forward to when we started Blokes, able to check my levels again. And then now I'm able to optimize them, and it's made a huge difference. And so,
Jacey, what were some of those levers that you pulled to get to that 100%?
So many. And so just so you guys know, when it comes to and a lot of people have touched on this today, when it comes to our healthcare system, the paradigm, the thought process, the way we're kind of brainwashed to think is there's a pill for every ill, right? It's a very monotherapeutic approach. In fact, if you ask anyone about like Alzheimer's, there's been billions of dollars invested in Alzheimer's, but there's no one medication that does anything. And there's really no one medication that treats really any condition. It just treats symptoms. So I was going after everything. So it was sleep. It was getting more sun. It was optimizing my vitamin D. It was reducing inflammation. It was cutting out anything inflammatory. And that's when I was moving more towards a higher protein, animal-based style diet, and made a huge difference. So I did like anything. And when I was practicing, I was doing all the biohacks, and it's pretty crazy like how all the different companies here, cold plunge, sauna use. I've been doing this for like 15 years. And so these are all the things I've been doing and teaching my patients, and it's just a little bit of each of those things that has moved the needle.
Amazing. Brittney, how about you? What about your story?
Yeah, so raised on basically standard American diet. When I was 19, read a book written by vegans that convinced me that meat is disgusting and I need to be vegan. So that lasted about a year, and then I really love ice cream, so I was vegetarian for 6 years. So I was vegetarian all through my dietetic education, everything in moderation, plant-based diets are great. I'm like, cool, I'm so healthy. And then I went to chiropractic school, and one of the chiropractors that I was shadowing, he had an undergraduate degree in biochemistry, so he was pretty knowledgeable in nutrition. We were shadowing him, and I was having really bad wrist pain. I was getting my wrist adjusted, nothing was helping, and he had this theory that zinc deficiency was linked to wrist injuries. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Why would it just affect your wrist? Like, that makes no sense. You're not a dietitian. What do you know? So I brushed it off. And then a few months later, we're shadowing him again. My wrist still hurts. It comes up in conversation again. And I'm like, well, what the heck? I'll try it. So I started eating red meat again, and my wrists were totally fine. I was like, wow, okay, there's something to this. So then about a year after that is when I heard Sean Baker on Joe Rogan's podcast. Tried Carnivore for about a month, and amazing turnaround in energy levels. I used to fall asleep every day after lunch without fail. Like, I could be in the front row of a classroom and I'm still like dozing off right in front of the professor. I just had sustained energy throughout the day. I gained 10 pounds of muscle really easily that I needed. And I just felt so good. I was like, dang, okay, I'm gonna keep eating meat.
Isn't it wild how we're conditioned as a society to think that you should be falling asleep under your desk after you eat your lunch?
Yeah, and it's totally normalized. Like, no one ever said that was a problem. I just thought, oh, whatever, I'm just tired after lunch because that's just the way life is.
Yeah. Yet when you eat the right foods, you actually feel energy after your meals too. Like, you want to go do work and be creative and productive, but it's all just about putting the right foods into your system. One of the things I really wanted to ask you is, it seems like with hormone health, there's this tendency to maybe oversimplify it of like men should only be worried about testosterone, women are hyper-focused on estrogen. I'm sure they both play a role, but I think it's probably much deeper than that. Are there any other hormones or any other metrics that people here should really be caring about to understand, like, if they have optimal health or not?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. So when it comes to hormones, really it has to do with what you're doing in all the hormones and really health itself, because what you do influences your hormones. And so what I like to ask people is, first of all, what is your definition of health? What is health to you? How do you define health? Is it comparing yourself to your old self? Is it comparing yourself to your parents or a friend? And how you define health determines like where you want to be. And so health is a spectrum. You can do things that can move you away from health towards the sick side, or you can do things that moves you towards more health. And it could be, more sunshine, like I talked about, exercise, grounding, cold plunge, cutting out inflammatory foods. And guess what? All of those things will influence those hormones that you talked about. So with men, I look at cortisol, I look at insulin, I look at, of course, testosterone. I look at estrogen in men. Estrogen is misunderstood. In fact, it's sort of demonized for some reason.
It is.
I think it's more because of a lot of the fact that clinics and a lot of clinics that do TRT for men and women will prescribe testosterone and will do it in more of like a super physiologic dosage where it will then shoot your estrogens pretty high. And so they kind of knee-jerk will just put a guy on an aromatase inhibitor or an estrogen blocker. However, what I found is most of these guys that have come to us from these other clinics, their estradiol levels are like 10 or single digits or 8. And the research shows that when estradiol is that low in a man, you're essentially losing your protection for cardiovascular health, for brain health, for bone density. And there's been studies showing where men, if they're chronically low in estradiol, they're at high risk of fractures, of hips, of things like that, cardiovascular disease. And so, yes, for men, I look at estradiol, I look at testosterone, total and free. For women, I look at testosterone, total and free. I look at progesterone, I look at estradiol. We look at the same things for both humans. So it's because all these hormones are human hormones. Testosterone is not a male hormone. Estradiol is not a female hormone. They're all human hormones. In fact, women make more testosterone than they do estrogen and progesterone.
Wow. I don't think a lot of people know that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I definitely didn't know that before you said that.
Yeah, well, it's
you?
really what he's saying is it's really just about overall health. So that's what I focus on is I'm going to help you make lifestyle changes that are going to help all of your hormones because I trust the innate intelligence of your body to regulate itself. So when I work with people, I actually don't even do blood work because I'm just going to focus on all of these things that I know is going to regulate your hormones. So for me, I don't necessarily care what the blood work says at that point because I want to know how you're feeling. And if you're feeling better, we know that you're healthier.
That's a great answer. Something that's becoming much more mainstream is just the plummeting fertility rates. It's like, we're having less babies than ever before. Sex drive is down. What are some of the things that you think are probably causing that? Is it a hormone imbalance primarily from lifestyle?
Birth control.
Yeah.
But not just people, but people who aren't using it anymore. People who have been using it, women who were put on it when they were teenagers because they had acne. Like, what? There's so many other things you could do for acne. I think that's a huge part of it. We're inundated with all of these fake hormones from birth control, but also from, soy or plastics or all of these other things in our lives. It's, not a mystery to me.
Yeah, and speaking a little bit more about the testosterone levels, which obviously correlate to, with sperm production, with fertility. If you look even back to the 1980s, the average range of a testosterone of a man is about 200 points higher than today. So we're seeing a significant decline in testosterone. And like she said, to her point, there's the use of plastics, there's atrazine, there's things that that we use in our crops and in our farming that ends up in the water. And so there's all these things. That were just pollutants in lifestyle. And I also think, to some degree, it's our technology. We're all staring at screens. Our lifestyles are just so much more stressful. Little things like having your phone next to your bed. That not a lot of people think that affects sleep, but it does tremendously affects sleep. In fact, if you have your phone next to your bed, think about it. When you wake up, what do you usually look at or grab? Or, whether it's in the middle of the night, whether it's in the morning. But if you know it's not there, you subconsciously know that that phone is not there to grab. So these little compounding interruptions of sleep and effects of deep sleep, and sleep is huge. I see patients, let's talk about firefighters, for example. Obviously, we all know firefighters don't have like the best consistent sleep schedule. I have yet to see a firefighter with optimal testosterone. I have yet.
Wow. So sleep is clearly that big of a driver to be 100%. Able to pull on.
You can have a guy in his 20s go like a week without ideal sleep, and his testosterone levels will drop to that of about a 60-year-old.
It's interesting how we're wired. I'm sure with Blokes you see this. I'm sure patients probably immediately want to get prescribed testosterone or peptides. It's like we never want to do the unsexy thing that actually works, whether it's like optimize your sleep, actually eat a nutritious diet, do these things over time like compounding interest. I'm sure that's something you both probably think a lot about.
Yeah, it's wild how basic so much of this is. It really comes down to, like, us as humans, we are not charged enough. Mm-hmm. How many people can go a whole entire day hardly being outside, never putting their bare feet in the grass, on their phones after sunset, right up until they go to bed, then they can't fall asleep, then they're not getting good sleep. It's so simple, but yeah, so many people just aren't taking those really simple steps. That's why, again, I'm like, there's so many steps I can take before I even care what your blood work says. I want you to go get barefoot in the grass for 20 minutes every day. I want you to go to bed before 10 p.m. All of these steps that we can take, you'll feel like a completely different human.
Were you gonna say something?
Yeah. So just, I'm kind of a geek when it comes to labs. I really like to dig into things and at least have a baseline of individuals, but I have yet to see a man or woman with optimal testosterone and low vitamin D. And there's so many of us that have very, very low vitamin D. And I just had a talk with a patient today, and he's like, well, what can I eat for vitamin D? I'm like, well, actually, go out into the sun. I mean, that's our bodies are designed to get sunshine. That's how we make vitamin D. And when you see that your vitamin D level is more optimized, and it's more a hormone than a vitamin. I don't even... We call it a vitamin, but it plays a role with immune health. It plays a role in mood, with depression, with hormone production. And then the way she and I practice, it isn't like looking for treating these things, these deficiencies allopathically, even with supplements. It's if somebody comes to me and they're like, look, I'm depressed or I'm on antidepressant medication. My first question is why. Why are you on this antidepressant? And we'll look and like, oh, your vitamin D's low. The next question I'll ask is, why? Why is your vitamin D low? Well, you're not getting enough sunshine. You're not, outside. And so in this case, either get more sun, or like, well, I golf every day. Well, you might have to golf in your Speedo or something like these. You're not getting enough, skin exposure.
I was going to say get naked in the sun.
Yeah, get naked in the sun.
Seriously, do it. It'll change your life.
100%. Yeah, in a lot of ways, right? No. Yeah. What the point is like the way doctors are trained, the way we're brainwashed to think is delegate our health to a doctor that's trained in allopathic medicine, trained to treat symptoms. And that's why we don't want to treat symptoms. We want to ask the questions why, and then continue to ask why and address the root cause.
I love that. And one of the things that I love that you both said about hormone health is it's not necessarily male versus female hormones. These are just human hormones that matter for both genders. Do you think that there are any differences for how maybe men and women should be approaching nutrition or weight training or anything along those lines?
Absolutely. So much of fitness and nutrition, all of it has been designed for men. Most of all the nutrition studies were just done on men. They didn't even have women because they were like, oh, they have cycles, that's too complicated. We can't factor that into our studies. But they're allegedly the best scientists that we should all look up to. It's vastly different. And because women, like men have their circadian rhythm, right? A 24-hour clock that you just run on every day, no problem. Women, we have our infradian rhythm is what it's called. It's our 28-ish day cycle, right? We have 4 different phases of our menstrual cycle. And so many women are so disconnected. Like, women don't even track their periods to even know like which phase of their cycle they're in. There's an archetype that goes with each phase of your cycle. You have the crone, the maiden, the mother, the sorceress. You like move through all these different energy levels throughout a whole entire month. And there's so many ways you can optimize that so many women are totally disconnected from.
Yeah, and like she was saying, you know, with you know the fasting craze, in like it works well for men. But women, different. It can, you know, if they're fasting during their period and in certain times of the month, it can significantly influence their hormones and their thyroid system, and so there's more nuances to that you have to be aware of. But I think across the board, I really feel women will benefit tremendously from resistance training and doing more resistance training, even though that's like I mean, all of us should. In fact, muscles themselves are endocrine organs, and they've found that muscles, when we contract them, secrete chemicals that affect our brain, you know, in an amazing way. It's like kind of like, you know, when I go to the gym and there's like a song on that I'm like, oh, I kind of like this song. It's kind of, you know, we can all stream songs whenever we want, right? And you go work out and you lift some weights and you do some, you know, you work out and you go back and play that same song again. You're like, this is awesome. Yeah. Like it's just like, because when you contract your muscles, you're releasing hormones that just enhance your mood. So we have like a pharmacy in our muscles. So it's so important for all of us to use those muscles.
Obviously, a big focal point of this summit has been, we've been talking a lot about animal products, the nutrient density behind those things. A controversial topic is, should women do a carnivore diet? How would they fare without carbohydrates? It seems like that's a very contentious topic. I'm curious. I know you've done a carnivore diet before. I think you did like a month of it. How do you feel about women just doing like a strict carnivore diet?
Yeah, so I'm open to it. So like I said, I did carnivore for about a month and then had pizza after a month because we had a pizza date every Friday with my friends. So now I would maybe call what I eat somewhere between carnivore and pro-metabolic. And I think with women, it's just really important to listen to your body, right? There's some women out there, like I think Kelly Hogan has been carnivore for 11 years and it completely changed her life. And she has a great menstrual cycle. And, you know, I don't know if she had kids after going carnivore or something. She's doing great on it. There's other women out there who will say, I went carnivore and it completely wrecked my hormones and my periods. So that's where I think nutrition is very bio-individual. I don't think it's individual in that, like, some people do well on vegan and some people do well on carnivore. I think we all need meat, but women can vary in the amount of carbohydrates that we thrive off of. And that's where you can really find that intuitive eating. I think someone said earlier, it's hard for women to do intuitive eating, but I think that's just because, again, women are not connected to their intuition. Like if you're a woman who's struggling with intuitive eating, are you even tracking your cycle? Do you know where you're at in your cycle? Because if not, you're completely disconnected from your body. So yeah, no wonder you're gonna struggle with intuitive eating. So like for myself, if I know that red meat is the basis of my diet and that's the most important thing for me to eat every day, then I can eat intuitively and add things in extra to the red meat that I'm eating.
How will you change the way that you're eating depending on where you are in your cycle?
So I do it intuitively. I don't have it quite memorized of like what you're supposed to do in each phase. I have an online course and I have a lecture on it, so I have talked about it before, but personally, I honestly do it all intuitively now. So you can like textbook learn it, but I really just feel into my body and I just, eat when I'm hungry. I eat what I feel like eating. I'll have raw milk ice cream nightly if I want to, and then I'll go through phases where I don't have it for 2 months. So yeah, there are different ways that you can eat for your cycle, but if you are connected to your cycle and you're connected to your body, it doesn't have to be complicated and you don't have to, go to your app and be like, oh, I'm feeling really hungry. Let me see. Am I in this phase? Am I allowed to eat more? I don't care if you're allowed to eat more. If you're hungry, you need to eat more.
That's great. Jacey, for men that are starting to get their blood work done, what are the ideal testosterone ranges that men should be looking for that actually signify that they are healthy?
So I like to see men in the range of like 700 to 1100 for optimal health, for total, and for free testosterone, I like to see 20 to 25. And so just giving it a little overview. So total testosterone is the amount of testosterone that's in the blood. The free testosterone is what is not bound to proteins. Most of our testosterone is bound to sex hormone binding globulin or albumin. And so I actually pay more attention to the free testosterone, which is what our cells can utilize, which is bioavailable. And because I see guys that are total testosterone's 850, 900, but their free testosterone is still suboptimal. And so then once again, why is that? And look at those other potential markers and lifestyle factors, and that's kind of what I go for.
For a guy that does have suboptimal testosterone, when will you start to think, okay, maybe testosterone replacement therapy is a good outcome for this individual, or hey, maybe peptides could play a role here? Like, is there a range that you look for?
It's all the things. So we want to look at history. We want to look at age. We want to look at other markers. We want to look at insulin resistance. We want to look at why. Why is their testosterone low? Is it because of high cortisol? Is it because of insulin resistance? Is it because of they're metabolically unhealthy? Are they getting enough sleep? Are they deficient in certain nutrients? So we kind of look at all of those things. What's their luteinizing hormone look like, which is the hormone secreted by the pituitary that tells the testes to make testosterone. And if sometimes testosterone replacement isn't the answer. Sometimes it's like pulling those levers, and sometimes if it shows in his blood work that his testes just can't make testosterone anymore, I mean that's a real thing. Then maybe TRT would be the answer. And so there's kind of just taking all those things in consideration. That's why the way we approach our patients is very, very individualized and very customized, and there's no cookie cutter, one size fits all type of a program.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Still my job, it's fine.
Sorry. So if you have a man who you're saying like his testes can't make testosterone anymore, have you ever tested to see if he goes and gets his balls in the sun, if then they can?
Yeah.
I'm gonna start. That's gonna be
try it.
Observational science.
Honey, what do you do?
Yeah.
No, I told my wife that the other day. I'm like, man, we need to make bigger fences in our backyard because I'm gonna.
Seriously. Right? Yeah. Have you seen any examples of guys that were basically hypergonadal that were able to get their test levels over 1,000 holistically without using TRT?
Wyatt.
Wyatt.
You mind? Sorry. Oh yeah. So Wyatt's a good buddy of mine, and so we got him on enclomiphene. And so just so you know, enclomiphene is like I was mentioning to Zane earlier. It's a you guys may have heard of Clomid, correct? So Clomid's an FDA approved medication for fertility in women. It's often used in men to boost testosterone production by it's classified as a SERM, selective estrogen receptor modulator. So what it does, it tricks the brain to think, there's not enough estrogen. So it will then, Clomid does this, it will then send a signal down to the pituitary to tell the testes to make testosterone. However, enclomiphene is a little cleaner version, newer, where they've removed one of the isomers. They removed zoochlomiphene, so it has a shorter half-life. You take it, a pill every day, and for some guys where their testes still are able to make testosterone, it does a great job of stimulating and turning on that feedback loop where you're turning on your own endogenous production. So it's pretty great. And we've seen cases where guys have been on this for some time, a couple years, and have discontinued using it for whatever reason, and their levels still remain high. So we have seen that.
So they've used it for a short period of time, and they get off of it, and the test levels stay elevated.
Its intention is to because it also increases fertility. One reason a lot of guys are leery and don't want to do TRT alone is because testosterone replacement, it does do amazing things, does optimize testosterone. You can control it if dosed appropriately, you get it right where you want it. However, it can diminish sperm production. So because what it is, it's replacing your body's testosterone production. Mm-hmm. And so you're no longer having that feedback loop. So if you were to discontinue TRT, your body has to kind of crash. So it's like not make, and then it's like, we need to make more. So you're turning on that feedback loop. The way enclomiphene works, it's enhancing that whole internal rhythm of the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal process, and so it's turning that on. So in some cases, when you remove that stimuli, that tool, it keeps going. So, but that's not the intended use of it. It's just like, take this, let's get you feeling great, and go for it.
Jacey, do you have any advice for men that maybe really could benefit from TRT, but they're worried about the negative stigma of testosterone, or maybe they don't fully understand it?
I think it's definitely get your levels checked, and the thing is, I think a lot of the stigma around it if every guy that I put on TRT or we put on TRT has benefited from it. Like everyone is like felt better if they're dosed appropriately. A lot of the stigma comes from the fact that there's a ton of guys that are taking it super physiologically at super high doses, and that is when you start to run into side effects. That's when your estradiol levels can get really high. That's when you can have our bodies aren't meant to make 5,000 level of testosterone. So, but most of the time, if a guy gets on testosterone and he's dosed appropriately, what we also have seen is they're feeling better. It's like going on the carnivore diet. You're eating better. You have more energy. You're starting to make lifestyle choices. It's the same thing with TRT. You're starting to do go to the gym. Starting to have a better marriage. You're starting to the bedroom. The fire's lit again. You're starting to just live life better at work, more focus, more motivation. And so that itself seems to once you turn that on, the body itself is like, wow, we're doing things that we should. And when you remove that replacement, we see if they continue to do those lifestyle habits, we see the levels higher than they were before they started. I have seen that.
It's funny. I know a guy that runs this event called Low Carb USA, and they do an event in San Diego every single year at a hotel. And the hotel's been there for 30 years. And this guy, Doug, that runs the event, said that the hotel manager came up to him and said, out of any conference that we've been to, you by far have the most friendly, energetic people we've ever seen at a conference. And it's pretty wild how getting your hormones under control, getting your health under control, it literally changes who you are as a person, right? It's pretty incredible. I'm kind of just speaking into the ether right now. But
Yes, preach.
All right, yeah, like I said before, like hormones, it literally makes us who we are. With men, we have a lot of testosterone receptors in our brain, the frontal cortex, and it's like if you see guys that have low testosterone, well, actually, it's the wife that's like Josh said earlier, that's like calling us, hey, you got to test my husband's test, because they just become apathetic, lack of motivation. Like Andrew Huberman says, like testosterone and dopamine are like cousins, So dopamine is like that neurotransmitter that helps with motivation and drive, and testosterone is very similar. And so when men and women start to have that not doing what it should do, libido drops, energy drops, motivation, it affects sleep, it affects all the things. So it makes you more driven.
Love it. All right, Brittney, we need the 30-second pitch on what women and men should know about birth control. Because that segment was so good on the podcast.
Yeah. Don't take it. I could sum it up right there, but I'll explain more. Just so many women don't realize that they are only fertile. Well, you're only fertile for 24 to 48 hours of the month. You can get pregnant anywhere from 5 to 7 days because sperm can survive inside of us for a few days. But still, that's 5 to 7 days out of a whole entire month. So why are we taking birth control pills every single day? And so many women out there are terrified of it's called natural family planning or just like cycle tracking, all of that, because they've heard, well, I know, my cousin got pregnant when she was doing that and this and that, but you have to find out the actual story. Was she actually tracking correctly? Was she tracking her temperature every single day? Around the same time every day, after getting at least 3 hours of sleep? Was she tracking her cervical mucus? Did she know the exact day that she ovulated based on all of these signs and symptoms? Because so many of these got pregnant doing cycle tracking, they weren't actually doing it correctly. Like I just read on a Facebook post the other day, a woman posted, oh, I can't do that because I got pregnant on it twice. And I took an ovulation test, but really I ovulated 2 days later. And I'm like, yeah, because the ovulation test, it was working correctly. So when you take an ovulation test, it's like you pee on a stick. It's an LH test is what you're testing for. So you're testing for that luteinizing hormone. That spikes 24 to 48 hours before you ovulate. So you have to know when your LH spikes and then track your temperature to confirm that you've ovulated 1 to 2 days after a positive LH test. But a lot of women, it just says ovulation test on it. So they think, oh, I peed on the stick. It was positive. I ovulated. And then they'll go have sex and then they get pregnant. It's not a mystery. We know what's happening. So you can just trust your body if you you'll get to know your body so much more, which is really at the end of the day, we are so disconnected from our bodies. And that's why we'll just take a birth control pill or we'll be sad and we'll go get on an antidepressant or, whatever it is. cycle tracking not only gives you the gift of being able to not be on a birth control pill, but it gives you the gift of knowing your body so much better.
Are there any apps or tools for cycle tracking that you get your clients and patients on that you recommend for the audience?
Yeah, my favorite is Natural Cycles app. Shoot me a message, I have a promo code. But there's also, I'm forgetting the name. There's a Daisy is another name of one, and Temp Drop is another one. But you want one that is gonna track your temperature, and you can like add in a bunch of other things like your cervical mucus, your symptoms, all of that kind of stuff. But Natural Cycles is one that I use that I love.
Is it true that women can actually be attracted to the wrong type of man on birth control and it actually changes when they get off birth control?
Yes.
That's wild.
Yes. You know what's even more wild is that I don't know how this came up one time when I was with a male patient, and somehow that randomly came up, and he was like, oh yeah, it's like a thing that him and his buddies knew, like, oh, if your girl gets off birth control, watch out, she might not like you anymore. I'm like, how does this Joe Schmo know this? And like half the women I talk to don't know this. So yeah, when you take the birth control pill, it alters the way, so you respond to human scent. So we have pheromones, you can't physically smell them, but your subconscious smells them. And so we are made to be attracted to a partner that is most genetically dissimilar to us. So we won't like go sleep with our cousin kind of a thing. But when you're on birth control, it alters how you smell those pheromones. So you're more likely to choose a partner who is like genetically similar to you. And so then if you come off the birth control pill, that's why you're like, all of a sudden you're not attracted to your man anymore.
It's like a shirt test they did, right? They smelled the shirt. Yeah, it was pretty cool. Yeah. Well, I'm going to add something to the birth control. Like back to the monotherapeutic, individualized thing is, you know, doctors prescribe birth control to women. And I consider myself a little bit of an expert with girls because I have 6 daughters. So very...
Wow. 6 daughters?
I have 6 daughters. So anyone else here have only daughters? Anyone? You only daughters? You're Andy, right? Yeah. Don't mess with Andy. Stone cold killer, man. Stone cold killer. No, when you have all girls, it does something to you. You know, well, you just like you're in protection mode. You know, don't mess with it. But anyway, so you give a woman your birth control pill, giving them estrogen. What you don't know is genetically we're all different, and birth control, estrogen is broken down into 3 different metabolites. You don't know which one your body is going to be more prominent in, and so one of these metabolites is very pro-inflammatory. So if you're taking a birth control pill and you happen to be the type that metabolites it into a more inflammatory type of estrogen, that's when you're going to have all those symptoms of, you know, PMS and bloating and just all the bad stuff. And the doctor's like, well, all my other patients are doing fine. Why are you having these symptoms? And so it's just kind of back to her point is like, you know, it's just not, everybody's different. And so you don't want to just like, you know, be prescribed something just because it works for, you know, 4 other patients, but it doesn't work for you.
Speaking of raising daughters, I don't have any kids yet myself, but that is where I think it is so important that we start this conversation now with these young girls. And we can connect them to their bodies and help them realize that your period is not shameful. And it's because that's what we've all been taught is like, oh, hide it. And women love to get on birth control to not have a period anymore. Not even realizing that that is so unnatural. It's wild. So I recently took part in a menarche reclamation ceremony. It was amazing. So your menarche is your first bleed. And so we went back and reflected on our first bleed and how we were treated when we had that. And most of the time it was like a lot of the women in the group were just saying it was really unceremonious. You know, it just kind of happened. You got thrown a couple pads and tampons. Good luck, you know, and that's it. And it's wild. So like for all the women in here, when you go home, like reflect on your first bleed and what you were told about it. And you can journal on this later and feel, what do you wish you would have been told about it? And what do you wish the women in your life would have told you about bleeding and about your period and about what that next stage of your life looks like?
It's really powerful. Jacey, you've mentioned cortisol a few times. What do we need to know about cortisol? How do we keep healthy cortisol levels?
Yeah, so cortisol, as you might know, it's a hormone that responds to stress and happens to be a very common, I call, killer of testosterone. And you can, you know, see men and women, if they're just going through even a mild stressful event, you'll see a dip in testosterone. So it's kind of like our bodies are very adaptive mechanisms. If you're applying a lot of stress to your body, it's adapting to that. And so Obviously, cortisol is very, very important and needed to wake us up in the morning. We have the circadian rhythm where cortisol is high, and that's why sunshine in the morning is so important. And but you don't want cortisol to be chronically high. When it's chronically high, your body's going to adapt to that. So I see, athletes that are really, really ultra intense endurance athletes running literally hundreds of miles a week, very low testosterone, high cortisol. And that's the same thing for people that have chronically high stress, chronic inflammation. Cortisol is one of our body's most powerful anti-inflammatories. So high cortisol will equal low testosterone. And there are ways to kind of counteract that from a supplemental standpoint, from a lifestyle standpoint. Some things that I recommend would be things like if people have chronically high cortisol from just stress, ashwagandha is a good one. If somebody has chronically high cortisol from high exercise, phosphatidylserine is a good one to kind of help you can take at night. And other adaptogens, as well as just stress management, breath work, stimulating your parasympathetic nervous system, getting off of the electronics while you're eating, and kind of making sure you're controlling your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system appropriately.
How does caffeine affect cortisol? Can it negatively affect it?
It can, but there are genetic components. Some individuals process and metabolize caffeine very easily. It has to do with your liver function. But like for me, I can drink caffeine before bed and go to bed no problem. Some people, if they have a cup of coffee about 1 or 2 p.m., it affects them. So yeah, and I do see that. I see people not only on blood work, if they had a glass of black coffee or cup of black coffee, their blood sugar goes up, as well as cortisol, as well as insulin. And some individuals, it doesn't really phase them. So that's an individual thing for sure.
So Jacey, you mentioned that herbs like ashwagandha could be positively effective. I'm curious, do either of you think that like synthetic vitamins or things like that do have a role to play? Or if you get all these other factors like diet, lifestyle, your cycle under control, you're probably in a good spot?
Yeah, I'm not really a fan of any synthetic. Like supplements will be like a beef liver capsule if you're not going to do real beef liver, or just all whole food based supplements.
Got it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the best levers to pull would be lifestyle, diet, Dr. Sun, Dr. Earth, prescription of exercise, sleep. The supplements we use and choose are those that are derived from like natural sources, like whole food type of ingredients.
Awesome. Well, this is super informative. I think we'd love to open it up to the audience for questions. We've got 2 incredible experts up here, so we wanted to take some extra time to answer any questions that you guys have about hormone, health, diet, et cetera. Lee?
Yes, my question is with women and their training and their 4 cycles, is there an optimal cycle in terms of weightlifting, low-intensity, steady-state cardio, or something of that nature to enhance their fitness results?
Yeah, absolutely. And I used to be a personal trainer back in the day, so dietitian, then trainer, then chiropractor. And I'm like cringe at my training days now because I'm like, I didn't even know about the female cycle, everything that I know now. So yes, for sure. So I like to break up the cycle into the 4 phases, like the 4 archetypes, like I said before. It makes more sense to me than like follicular or luteal. So you have menstrual phase when you're bleeding, pre-ovulation, ovulation, and then pre-menstrual. So the menstrual phase is when that's the most low energy. So that's when it's good to do like yoga, like not intense yoga, like yin yoga, taking a nap, like that could be your exercise, like very low intensity stuff. Then the next phase, your pre-ovulation, so that's your maiden archetype, if you want to know about the archetypes too. So that is your energy levels are starting to rise. It's like springtime, so that's when you can start to up the intensity a little bit more. Ovulation, that's the mother archetype, that's the most energy. So that's when it's good to do the high intensity, like if you're gonna do HIIT intervals, burpees, CrossFit, that kind of a thing. Then we have I just said ovulation, so then premenstrual. So then we have the week before the bleed, which is your sorceress archetype. And that's, again, so now you're preparing for the bleed. That's when like PMS can start to set in. So that's when you, again, want to go back to that lower intensity. That's when it's good to do like heavier weightlifting, but at a slower pace, getting ready for your bleed.
Any other questions? Carlisle?
Okay, I have a question about how do you guys feel about using
I'm actually okay with that. Just because we live in such a stressful world. Like you said, that cortisol is the enemy of testosterone. It's also the enemy of progesterone. And if you're estrogen dominant, that also will eat up your progesterone. So that is like one case where I'm like, okay, if you're living like a super modern life, you know, then I'm okay with that, at least to get you out of like symptomatic phase too. You know, maybe if you're gonna use it for a while and then we can get some more of these other lifestyle factors back in place, more, you know, grounding, sunshine, less stress, that kind of a thing, then you can start to come off of it.
I'll add to that. So when it comes to, like she said, the estrogen dominance, there could be an imbalance. So the progesterone to estrogen ratio we use is a way to determine how much estrogen there is to progesterone. And oftentimes a woman may have enough progesterone, but too much estrogen. And like we talked about before, she could have a lot of the bad metabolites. So there's some things you can take from a nutritional standpoint. Cruciferous vegetables help lower estrogen. There's a product in cruciferous vegetables called DIM, which is you can get it in supplement form that can help lower estrogen to get that ratio better. And then there's another product called calcium D-glucarate, which can really help with the bad metabolite that, you know, goes along with the PMS symptoms. And really it's about getting that ratio dialed in, the progesterone to estrogen ratio. And there's ways to do that. That's why I do like testing to calculate that and see where they are with that, and then start to utilize those tools. And then if need be, if the progesterone is low, we can add in that as well.
Andy?
I'm hesitant to ask this, but I'm going to ask it. You know, culturally as dads, we've been kind of conditioned with girls, so girl dad, we've been conditioned to say anything that has to do with the girl's body, the woman's body, is mom's deal, right? Like, I don't want to deal with it. Is that appropriate? Is that inappropriate? How does dad get involved in those types of things, or should we?
That's a fantastic question. I'll answer first as a girl, and then you can answer as the girl dad. So I think it's a very sacred thing for women to educate women. And I think that, like, I feel pretty strongly that most women should go to mostly women doctors. Because I just think there's this really sacred piece of us educating each other and like sitting in women's circles together and, you know, sharing those experiences and passing down that wisdom. And I don't think it should be completely shut off by the man, because you're the model for her future husband, right? And she needs to be able to talk to her future husband about these things too. So that's where I think it's really good to have an open discussion. Like, yes, obviously mom's job is going to be very different than yours in educating the woman, because she is a woman. Like, there's pieces of being a woman you're never going to understand. But I do still think she should be comfortable talking to you about it, because again, that comes back to the shaming period piece, or like, oh, it's gross and dirty and ugly and it needs to be hidden away. If she thinks that she can't talk to a man or her dad about it, right? Like, you're the primary man in her life for her first years. She needs to be able to talk to you about it and it be totally okay and open and not gross and dirty and not need to be hidden.
That's a good answer. So I think my approach is I leave it very open. I ask my daughter look, Dad's here for you. If you ever want to come to me and talk about any of these things, your menstrual cycle, you know, I know a lot about this stuff. But my daughter that's 17 really starts to roll her eyes pretty quickly when I start to, you know, and I'm like, hey, I'm here for you, honey. So if you ever want to talk about it, I just let my daughters know that I'm there for you if you're ever comfortable asking me about. But my wife's a nurse and handles it really well, so we make a good team. But I think it's important to, like she said, just let your girls know that dad is comfortable talking about it. You know, I'm around your mom all the time. I know when she has her period, we talk about it. It's not weird. It's just, you know, maybe you feel weird about it because, you know, you're at, you know, your age and your point in life, but it's really normal, natural. And if you ever want to talk about it, you know, I'm here for you.
I love it. Girl dad. Any other questions? I feel like, yep.
Any thoughts on pregnenolone?
Yeah, so pregnenolone's a good product. I like it. I like pregnenolone and DHEA. Pregnenolone is a precursor for progesterone. DHEA is also another precursor hormone to to testosterone and other sex hormones. And there's a phenomenon when we're all stressed out and our bodies are using cortisol like crazy. And there's it's called pregnenolone steal. So your body will start to use pregnenolone, and instead of converting it into testosterone, we'll convert it to cortisol to help with all the stress that we're doing to ourselves. And so we do prescribe pregnenolone and DHEA often.
So it seems like a lot of women deal with infertility, and especially after getting off birth control. How long does it take a woman's body to actually start creating, and her hormone levels getting back to normal after getting off of birth control?
It's super dependent on the woman and what steps she's taking. A lot of women just go cold turkey and just think, oh, I can just stop taking it. And then they also think they're just gonna get pregnant the next month, right? They're all so scared about that. I'm like, it's actually pretty hard. But so it really depends on if she's taking steps to heal her body from being on birth control. If you are coming off of birth control with the intention of wanting to get pregnant, I like to take at least a year to prepare your body for pregnancy. So I would say wait at least a year until you're even trying to have sex during ovulation to get pregnant, to replenish all the nutrient stores, because birth control depletes a ton of nutrient stores from our bodies, and just prepare your body for pregnancy.
So something I've seen, when you're taking the birth control pill, a lot of these girls will gain weight, and weight gain, and insulin resistance, which is why I like to test. So we'll test patients' metabolic health, the level of insulin resistance that they have. And not a lot of people realize this, but one of the most common underlying causes of infertility in men and women is insulin resistance. PCOS, the underlying kind of theme there is hyperinsulinemia, insulin resistance. And what insulin is doing when it's resistant, it impacts, it inhibits the ability for your body to convert your androgens, your testosterone, to the right estrogens at the ovaries. And so that's when you'll see these gals with PCOS having higher testosterone and becoming infertile. But in men, insulin resistance also contributes to some degree of erectile dysfunction, because part of the vasodilation process is very dependent on insulin. So if you have insulin resistance, you're not getting that proper nitric oxide boost effect. So insulin resistance is very common in America. 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy, close to 90%, and just getting worse and worse. And so that is also an underlying thing. Look at them metabolically and start to address that as well, because it'll have a downstream ripple effect on those hormones.
Amazing. Any other questions? Yep. Tom?
Some states are going after gender-affirming care. Does that threaten any of the hormone treatments that you do with the way the laws are written? Or do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know either.
Yeah, so some states are targeting gender-affirming care, right? And that includes hormone therapies.
Right.
Does that put in danger your hormone therapy that you do?
Are you cutting genitals off?
No. Are you talking more about them getting on some type of hormones, like testosterone, correct?
Yeah, getting any sort of gender-affirming care is being attacked in certain states. But my question is, does that affect your hormone therapy things at all, or do you know?
I mean, I've talked to attorneys about this. If anything, it probably encourages more hormones for us, because let's just talk about testosterone. Testosterone is a controlled substance.
Sure.
And that's under a completely different radar for us for a virtual clinic. It falls under other regulations. So that this push is actually probably going to help us, just from an accessibility standpoint.
I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Good answer. Thanks, Josh. Any other
Thanks,
questions,
Josh.
Charles?
Yeah, I would just, especially to Dr. Brittney, I agree completely with the sacredness of like mom, daughter, girly things times. But I would, that was a nice summation. I would encourage you, are there programs that exist where there are female teaching? I have a pretty serious different idea of what health means with my children's mother. And so I think you see, especially in light of the last 3 years, you see a lot of divide and divisiveness between appropriate care. So to be able to point my daughter to a resource that's female-driven, that's maybe, Carlisle, I remember our talks on your podcast, but just like being able to take my daughter and say, hey baby, here's another lady saying something other than maybe your mom's telling you, because she's pro this and pro that.
Yeah, I feel you on that. That's like, I'm not married yet or anything, but that's one thing that terrifies me of like choosing the wrong partner is like, what if, you know? So moving forward. So right now I am doing an online course called the Blood Mysteries School. That is amazing resource. It's put on through the Free Birth Society. So that's one place that I know of that exists online right now. I would love to start doing some like menarche reclamation ceremonies myself. I have this like dream to have some like land and put like a yurt on it, and we can do like women's circles in it and like go put our feet in the grass. So if anyone has land in the area too, hit me up. Maybe we could host our next one there.
We'll do
I don't
it there.
know.
It'd be perfect.
So I would love to start doing that too, but that's honestly something that is very needed. Other than Blood Mysteries School, I mean, well, I guess in the birth world, there's a lot of women that are educating other women too. So that's like another good place to start. Because that's honestly where I've learned a ton of, this information is getting involved with women giving birth and, babies. Like it all starts with all of that. But yeah, we definitely need more resources.
I'm just highlighting an opportunity to fill a void that I don't believe exists right now, because I'd love to be able to point my now 8 that's, soon that those talks are going to be having.
Yeah.
Any podcasts that you'd recommend?
I'm trying to think of podcasts on that specific topic. Because honestly, a lot of the ones I've listened to are just like birth podcasts. Yeah. Like Free Birth Society and stuff. Or a lot of them just talk about hormones. But see, that's the thing too, is that's one aspect that I'm really starting to dive into, is like the spiritual side of womanhood and hormones and all of that I've really just like this year have been diving into, that I love. And I think it's like, I'm kind of bored talking about the ins and outs of hormones at this point. I'm like, let's talk about like the archetypes of your cycle. Like, are you stepping into your mother, and are you like embracing your sorceress? So I'm still finding those resources for myself, basically, is what I'm saying. Blood Mysteries School is just the one that I know of right now. So stay tuned. I'll probably, if she's on social media, follow me on Instagram. I'll probably post things as I find them.
Next year, we're definitely doing an Embracing Your Sorceress panel, so we'll make that happen.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, we have time for one more question if anyone has anything they want to ask.
Yeah, to your right.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, so, I'm sort of, grew up on the food pyramid and so forth. There's been so much great information here today. And it doesn't even necessarily, my question isn't necessarily just nutrition, but for the younger, like I'm looking towards, not yet, but at some point my grandkids, or, I have a godson and some other younger family members. Anything key that you would say for kids, like developing kids, either nutritionally or hormonally, or things that folks should pay attention to? Just anything that rises to the top.
Yeah, I'll say, I was like you too. I grew up on that, and I was a carbaholic, man, most of my life, and was even insulin resistant or pre-diabetic when I was early 30s. I have a daughter that's a type 1 diabetic, and so I was able to check my blood sugar. And I was the guy that ate 6 meals a day because I thought that's what you're supposed to do, and work out like a madman. But I tell people, kids now, prioritize protein. Really focus on protein. In earlier better, because that allows you to build that lean muscle throughout life, because that is the currency that we want to build and maintain throughout life. And so prioritizing protein, it's really the way our psychology works is when we tell ourselves don't do something, don't eat that, it kind of like, well, then I guess I'll, I have kids, trust me, I know they go right to whatever I tell them not to do. So, but like, prioritizing protein. So I'll cook a steak, and my 7-year-old will just grab a plate, and she knows she's ready for that. And I have my 7-year-old and 10-year-old, they're baby T-Rexes, man. They eat they kill some meat. So, and so yeah, that's my thing that I kind of in real food. If it's going to be carbs, it's like fruits and in real foods.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Oh, and I was gonna, like she mentioned earlier about zinc with the wrist. The number one most common cause of zinc deficiency is comes from consuming whole grains. So, which is what we grew up on. So, the years and years of consuming whole grains. I mean, that's why they actually had to fortify cereals, because people were eating cereals back in the day and developing nutrient deficiencies. So they have to fortify, add things in it that you're not getting, and so, but that you cut out whole grains, you have less deficiencies.
I'm sure it's also cool for you as a dad with your wife to actually be able to get your girls in the kitchen, teach them, about good quality food, how to actually cook it, where good food comes from, just starting to instill some of those patterns into their minds at a really young and impressionable age, right?
Yeah, they love it, and everybody at their school makes fun of them for their lunches.
Yeah, but they're crushing it.
Yeah, they're crushing
it. Fine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, let's give a great round of applause for our amazing... Sorry, Brittany's mom had a question, so we need.
I do, yes, this is my daughter. I have 2 other girls, so I'm a girl mom. But I would actually like to ask for those women in the audience that are like me, post-menopause, how do those that you just described, like the nature and the mother, come into play with hormones in menopause? Is it similar, is it different?
Yeah, so once you enter into menopause, you don't cycle anymore, so you don't move through each archetype. So we have the archetypes of our cycle, the 4 archetypes, but we also have those archetypes in our larger life cycle as well. So you also move through the maiden, typically in your early 20s, into mother, which you can have children and move into your mother archetype, or you cannot have children. Like I'm right now in my mother archetype, even though I don't have children yet. And then you move into sorceress is when you're premenopausal, and then postmenopausal is your crone archetype for your larger life cycle. So in that case, you just step into your crone archetype for the larger life cycle, but you don't have the 4 cycles every month that you're moving through anymore.
Okay.
All right, one more round of applause. Cool, thank you. Appreciate it.